Super Troopers wasn't born out of confidence or clever planning. It came from fear, frustration, and a group of young men who knew Hollywood wasn't waiting for them. This wasn't a studio comedy polished by executives in glass offices. It was a dare against authority, against good taste, and against the idea that only famous faces deserve to be heard. Behind the laughter and absurd pranks was a constant risk that the movie would collapse at any moment, taking its creators down with it. Every joke was written under pressure. Every scene existed because someone refused to compromise. What audiences saw as carefree stupidity was actually discipline disguised as chaos. And that's why this film still hits differently decades later. Because it wasn't trying to be timeless, it was just trying to survive. But what happened behind the scenes is far stranger, riskier, and more revealing than anything that made it onto the screen. 1. The opening scene wasn't a joke, it was panic, remembered. The legendary opening of Super Troopers didn't come from clever writing sessions or improv games. It came from real fear. Broken Lizard had lived that moment, crossing borders with the sickening certainty that authority could destroy them in seconds. One real incident involved drugs in a car, a tense inspection, and a panic decision so irrational it bordered on self-destruction. That memory became the film's emotional engine. The reason the scene still works decades later is simple. It isn't exaggerated. It's restrained. The comedy comes from watching the human brain short-circuit under pressure. Authority stays calm, power stays silent, and stupidity becomes survival instinct. This wasn't stoner humor. It was psychological truth wrapped in comedy. From the very first minute, the movie wasn't asking viewers to laugh at drugs. It was asking them to recognize themselves when fear takes control. 2. The script survived because it was written like a weapon. Super Troopers didn't survive development because it was charming. It survived because it was relentless. The script went through more than 20 drafts, not in search of perfection, but in pursuit of momentum. Broken Lizard realized early that they wouldn't be forgiven for slow scenes or clever pauses. Every moment had to earn oxygen. Their solution was ruthless, a joke every 6 seconds. That rule wasn't about laughs, it was about control. Jokes became structure. Rhythm became defense. Each rewrite tightened the machine until there was no wasted space left for doubt or executive interference. The exhaustion was real. The group nearly fractured under the pressure. But what emerged wasn't chaos, it was density. That's why the movie feels alive. It doesn't wander, it attacks. And that intensity didn't come from confidence. It came from knowing failure was one weak scene away. 3. Hollywood didn't reject the movie, it tried to neutralize it. The most dangerous moment in Super Troopers history wasn't rejection, it was approval with conditions. Studios didn't say the film was bad. They said it was promising if it became something else. Fox wanted it reshaped into television. Miramax circled without committing. Universal offered real money, but only if Broken Lizard surrendered control. New writers, a different director, smoother edges, safer comedy, familiar faces. The kind of deal that gets a movie made and quietly removes its soul. Broken Lizard said no. That decision nearly erased the film entirely. They had no backup offers, no leverage, no guarantee another chance would come. But they understood something crucial. A compromised version might survive opening weekend, but it would never survive memory. Saying no didn't protect their egos. It protected the identity of the film. And in Hollywood, identity is the rarest currency of all. 4. The movie exists because one outsider trusted instinct over strategy. Super Troopers was not saved by a studio executive. It was saved by someone who wasn't part of the system. After years of closed doors, a retired Wall Street investor read the script as a favor. No agents, no meetings, no expectations. He laughed. And instead of rewriting the movie, he financed it exactly as written. One investor, one check, roughly $1.25 million. No safety net, no studio oversight. If the movie failed, everyone lost. That kind of risk no longer exists in mainstream Hollywood, and that's why the film feels untouched by committee thinking. Even the title came from outside the industry offhand. Instinctive, honest. The movie was funded and named by people who weren't trying to manage it. They were trying to let it live. Sometimes, art survives not because experts approve it, but because outsiders recognize truth when they see it. 5. Refusing stars wasn't pride, it was self-preservation. At the peak of development, attaching a movie star would have guaranteed funding. Names like Ben Affleck were floated seriously. The pressure was real. But Broken Lizard refused to hand their film to someone who didn't build it. They understood that star power would shift gravity, the jokes would soften, the tone would tilt, the film would stop belonging to its creators. Instead, they bet on something far riskier: anonymity. They starred themselves, they directed themselves, and by doing so, they protected the voice of the movie. Ironically, this choice made the film stronger. Without celebrity insulation, every performance had to commit fully. There was nowhere to hide. That honesty is why the film still feels intimate. It doesn't feel performed. It feels inhabited. Sometimes the bravest creative decision isn't adding power, it's refusing it. 6. The production was chaos, and the camera didn't blink. The loose energy of Super Troopers wasn't crafted in post-production. It was lived on set. The film was shot on real roads, real locations, with minimal control. Scenes unfolded near active traffic, real prisons, and unpredictable crowds. Actors were heckled, takes were disrupted. The tension seeped into performances. Even the infamous syrup scene used real maple syrup because fake substitutes looked dishonest. Multiple takes. Real discomfort. The humiliation wasn't simulated, it was endured. Even background actors weren't professionals. They were friends, classmates, anyone willing to commit. That's why the film doesn't feel polished. It feels earned. The comedy breathes because it was captured under pressure. Controlled chaos gave the film its pulse. And once again, limitation became identity. 7. The uniform accidentally became real power. In one of the film's strangest ironies, actors pretending to be cops began experiencing real authority. Dressed in uniform, cast members stopped traffic without permits. Drivers obeyed. No one questioned it. One actor was pulled over at extreme speed and talked his way out of consequences. Years later, another was released from a real traffic stop because the officer recognized the movie. The joke crossed into reality. The film accidentally proved its own thesis. Authority is often perception. Confidence plus costume equals power. That realization gives Super Troopers an edge that most comedies lack. It isn't just mocking authority, it's exposing how fragile it really is. 8. Brian Cox didn't lower himself, he liberated himself. Casting Brian Cox wasn't a stunt, it was a collision of needs. Cox was known for gravity, menace, and authority, but he wanted out of that cage. He loved broad comedy, physical absurdity, commitment without apology. In Super Troopers, he played Captain O'Hagan with total seriousness, which made every insult hit harder. He didn't wink, he didn't soften, he believed every word. That contrast anchored the film. His presence legitimized the chaos. And for Cox, the role wasn't a detour, it was freedom. Sometimes great casting isn't about stretching an actor, it's about letting them finally be honest. 9. The movie didn't win opening weekend at one time. Super Troopers didn't explode at the box office. Critics were lukewarm. Then something unusual happened. The movie found its audience slowly, on VHS, on DVD, in dorm rooms and living rooms, through quotes, repetition, belonging. It became a shared language. That afterlife mattered more than opening numbers. 17 years later, the sequel existed for one reason: fans paid for it. Not studios, not algorithms, people. That is the final lesson of Super Troopers. Real connection outlives marketing. Integrity outlasts trends. And sometimes, the movies that refuse to play the game are the ones that stay with us the longest. Super Troopers endures because it proves a truth Hollywood still struggles to accept. The most lasting films are not engineered by committees, but protected by conviction. This wasn't a movie that survived because it was safe, polished, or star-driven. It survived because the people behind it understood who they were, what they wanted to say, and most importantly, what they refused to surrender. Every risk they took became part of the film's DNA. Every limitation sharpened its voice. And every rejection forced them to choose integrity over convenience. The legacy of Super Troopers isn't just quotable lines or cult status. It's the reminder that comedy can be intelligent without being cynical, rebellious without being hollow, and silly without being disposable. It shows that audiences remember honesty far longer than spectacle, and that real connection doesn't need permission from the industry. If this story changed the way you see the movie or Hollywood itself, make sure to like the video, leave a comment with the moment that still makes you laugh, and subscribe to the channel. We tell the stories behind the movies that never stopped pulling us back.